Okay, let's not get into it. Here we go.
I think we should.
Tonight we're learning Maseches Eruvin Daf Pei, and we're starting right at the very last line of Daf Pei Daled. A big grab a sheet while you're on your way in. We've been in conversations here about the way two people should interact if they are separated by things. We've learned Perek Chalon, we've learned Perek Kosel, all about Chatzeros that interplay with each other. And one of the questions that we need to deal with is, what if the only thing that really separates people is airspace? Does airspace have any halachic mitzias to it at all? And that's going to be most of tonight's sugya, from the beginning of tonight until the Mishnah, halfway down on Pehei and Beis. The framing of this was stated by Shmuel, as we know, and as will come up today. Shmuel was a Talmud. The framing of this today was by Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Shmuel. And as we know, Rabbi Yehuda was a Talmud both of Shmuel and of Rab. We learned of another person also, maybe Rav Nachman. I can't remember who the other person was. Can't remember who it was. But certainly Rabbi Yehuda learned in both places. And the way the Gemara frames out this case, it's not written the way that I framed it, but if you look at the top of the sheet in the WhatsApp group, I sent that out as well for everyone to see, hopefully a better way to share. But at the top of this, I framed out the question based on the way that Rashi understands what's going on for the whole flow of this Gemara, which is how does airspace, how does avir impact using a common space with one another? Because normally we know that if you and I can both equally access a space, well, maybe that's going to forbid me from the other person. So we're going to start this at the very bottom of Pei Daled Amud Beis at the very last line. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Bor shebein shtei chatzeros, if you have a pit and it is between two chatzeros, mufleges mikosel ze'arba umikosel ze'arba, it is distant from the wall, 4 from each side. So this case requires Rashi to understand. And in short, what Rashi says is what this picture shows. And what the picture shows is on the right side, you have chatzar number 1. On the left side, you have chatzar number 2. In the middle is this kind of mavui-esque type of space. Take a look at the top Rashi. Rashi writes here, Dibur hamaschil bor shebein shtei chatzeros, and he writes at the end of the first line, umafzik beinehen, ke'ein mavui katan ve'ein diurin psuchen lo. So the middle space, as drawn here in the picture, there's no entry space, only windows that allow you to get in. It's only airspace. You cannot actually get into that space. It's closed off. You'd have to climb under, climb over, however, but normally you will not be able to access it. So, and then as you can see, the bor is in the middle, and it's more than 4 tvachim from each of the walls. It's more than 4 tvachim from the wall of the chatzar number 1, and more than 4 tvachim from the wall on the left. So then, second line of Pehei Amud Aleph says, again, Rabbi Yehuda speaking in the name of Shmuel, and he says, Zeh motzei ziz kol shehu umemale, v'zeh motzei ziz kol shehu umemale. So normally, if we would have had equal rights to this space, and had it been that the pit was less than 4 tfachim from each of our respective areas, we would have assered on one another because we can't both be in the same space at the same time. However, as we learned in yesterday's Mishnah, and we're really piggybacking on that last line there, that once you're outside of 4 tfachim, then you're no longer in common space. It's mufleges. The bor is mufleges. It's too far away for either of you to claim a stake. So therefore, says the Gemara, what you can do is you can extend a ziz, a little extension, a little ledge from your window, and then you can be mamala. You can reach over and you can fill up a pitcher and bring it back into your property, and the other person can do the same thing. Why? Why are they allowed to do it? Because it's mufleges. It's pushed away from the walls at least 4 tfachim. So if you look in the picture on the left, you'll see that there's a black box at the bottom of the window. It's a ledge, and this is a heker. This is the din of Shmuel. Shmuel says that when the bor is muflag from the chatzar number 1 and chatzar number 2, more than 4 tfachim from each person, it doesn't aser one another like a normal rishus would that's stuck in the middle. It doesn't aser. However, you need a heker. That's the din of Shmuel. You need a heker, and the heker is the ziz, this black ledge, and I actually wrote next to the stick figure on the left, I'm Shmuel. Shmuel is of the opinion that you need a heker, and that's why on his side he has one. Now Rab, as we'll get to soon, doesn't hold that way. 4th line of the Gemara. Rabbi Yehuda diday, remember Rabbi Yehuda quoted Shmuel. Rabbi Yehuda himself said, "Afilu kanya." Yes, you can see that there's a black ledge here that Shmuel said you needed to use a ziz, but Rabbi Yehuda says he even meant you could use a reed, a kanya, a kanet, just a leaf, just a little nothing. The Rishonim, right? What's his raya? That there's no shear for the ziz. There's no shear for the extension that's added to the window. Okay, fine. that's the backdrop to today's sugya. Is basically look at the picture. They're going to extend their arms through the window. It's not drawn to scale. They're going to extend their arms through the window. These arms are not very long, but if they would do so, 4 tefachim is not a lot. I mean, 4 tefachim is 16 inches at the most. It's not that much. Anyone's wingspan could reach out and just get something. It won't even be that hard. So that's really what's happening here. And how do we look at interacting with that common space only using avir, only using airspace, and nothing physical that's otherwise separating? And that's tonight's sugya. Amrli Abayla Rav Yosef. Ha de Rabbi Yehuda de Shmuel. The opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, where he said the kana, that's really, he's just echoing Shmuel. And why am I saying that? Why is the Gemara bothering to highlight who it's from? Because look at the next words. De Rav, if you thought that he learned that when he was learning under Rav, impossible. All right, now we're going to see our split, where Shmuel holds X and his Talmud Rabbi Yehuda holds like him, and Rav holds Y. What does Rav hold? It can't be Rav. Either Rav, had it been that Rabbi Yehuda learned this din from Rav, then Ha'amar, what does Rav say? Ein Adam Oser al Chavero derech avir. You cannot aser your friend because of airspace. So now look on the right side, the Chatzir, I'm Rav. Where's his windowsill? No windowsill. He doesn't need a heker. There's no way to aser your friend because of airspace. And that's why the Gemara here distinguishes and highlights that Rabbi Yehuda must have learned this din when he was in the yeshiva of Shmuel and not when he was in the yeshiva of Rab. Shmuel mehecha. What is the Mari Makom that the Gemara is using here to support Rabbi Yehuda within Shmuel? Ilema, if you want to say that it's the Gemara that we learned yesterday, Mehada Amar Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel. If you want to say it's from the Gemara that said yesterday, Gag hasamach l'reshus harabim tzarich sulam kavua lehatiro. Yesterday we said there was a case where there was a roof, and one side of the building was from a chatzer. And the Rishonim here explained that maybe you'll use your chatzer to throw something derech avir, right? That's going to be the link to this case. Maybe that's the case of Shmuel. And the latter is the heker. We said tzarich sulam kavua lahatiro. Maybe that's the Mari Makom that says, this is where Rabbi Yehuda learned this din from Shmuel from. He extracted it from the case of Gag hasamach l'reshus harabim, and the sulam was the heker, just like the ziz. Says the Gemara, no, maybe not. Dilma kira papa. As we saw, Kidra Papa, like we saw yesterday, the last couple of lines on Daf Pei Daled Amud Beis, we learned that case may not be a raya. Maybe the reason why we needed that kavua ladder wasn't because it was a heker to override the concern of avir within the world of Shmuel. Maybe it was totally secondary, which is, as the Gemara on the bottom of Daf Pei Daled Amud Beis pointed out, that Rav Papa highlighted that maybe that was a space of Rabbi Mekatfin alav, that people were all using that space, and therefore we needed the ladder. So that can't be the source of Shmuel. Therefore, says the Gemara, 1/3 of the way down, Pei Amud Aleph, says the Gemara, Elameha. It's actually from a different source. Where did Rabbi Yehuda glean his idea from that you can use a reed that all of Shmuel's din that we need a heker? It's from our Mishnah. It's from this statement, I should say, of Rabbi Yehuda Mar Shmuel. It's from Shmuel itself. He learned about this in Shir. Zeh motzei ziz kol shehu memale, v'zeh motzei ziz kol shehu memale, ta'ama de'afik. The reason why he said it was a deal. If you're going to say that we need a ziz, that we need something, what's the implication? That if you don't do something, it's going to be us, or just like Rav, that Shmuel was of the opinion that even a reed would work, and you need some type of heker, and that gives us the appropriate explanation for Shmuel. Udarav mehecha. What's the Mari Makom that supports Rav Shita? We pointed out that Rav is of the opinion that you are not able to aser your friend because of airspace. Okay, let's see if that plays out. What is Rav's Mari Makom? Says the Gemara. Ilema meha. If you want to say it's from another case that we learned yesterday, Shtei Gizus Tros Zolam Alamizo. We have 2 porches that extend from a building, one above the other, not straight one above the other, but side to side and up and down, a little bit off and misaligned. And it was above water. And asu mechitza le'elyona v'lo asu mechitza le'tachtona. And there was a mechitza tluya that was for the Eliona, so he could draw up water, because otherwise you'd be taking from a Carmelis into your Rishus HaYachid. So you built a mechitza tluya, and now you're taking from your own Rishus HaYachid into your own Rishus HaYachid. Fine, that works out. So, but it was asum mechitza le'elyona v'lo asum mechitza le'tachtona. So the din should have been shtehen asuros ad sheyarvu. It should be usur for each of them to interact because they don't have an eruv yet. Amar Ravuna, Amar Rav, here comes Rav, Lo Shanu Ela B'Smucha. We see That's only true when they're bismucha. When do we say you're forbidden from one another when there's no eruv? That's when you're bismucha, when you're within Daled Amos. Aval, and now you can see a comparison to our case. Bimufleges arba, just like our bor. If the four tfachim that separate our two porches are four tfachim, they're right to left tfachim, they're not up and down. You have to be within 10 tfachim up and down, and then right to left. On the x-axis, you have to be within 4 of one another. But if you're mufleges, aval b'mufleges arba, then elyona muteres v'tachtona asura. And what do we see from here? You cannot answer your friend because of airspace. It's very clear. So that's a beautiful raya for Rab. Says the Gemara, you can't say that. You can't say this is a proof of Rab, even though it's accurate that the friend who lives in the tachtona doesn't answer the person who's in the elyona. Because once you're beyond smucha, once the space is mufleges, you're 4 tfachim plus away from each other, right to left. So then it's only airspace. Then it's not considered a tashmish, it's only airspace. And we see that airspace does not ruin it, and that is the world of Rab. And that's maybe where Rab gets the answer from. Says the Gemara, no, that's not correct. Dilma shiny hacha. Maybe Rab would say it's not because avir is not problematic. It's not because avir needs a heker or doesn't need a heker. This isn't that case at all. Dilma shiny hacha. 7 lines from the bottom. Maybe this case is different. If from the lower person, if he wanted to get water, he'd have to throw a pitcher with a rope up into the Elyona's porch and then into the hole in the ground in the Elyona's and then let it fall all the way down. And you're comparing that. So you have on one side, the Lazebes Rika B'Shilshol, the Lazebes Shilshol, the Chudei. So then the lower porch has much more work to do. He has to throw it up and make it fall into the door trap. It's very difficult to do. And then says the Gemara, Kalazebes Rika, the Lazebe Pesach Dami. Then we would say that these two cases, these two porches are not comparable because one of them has much more work to do. And for the person who lives in the Elyona, the person who lives in the upper porch with the hole in the bottom, it's much easier. Open the trap door, drop the line. So therefore, says the Gemara, maybe that's why we would say that the friend doesn't answer, that the tachtona doesn't answer the Elyona, and therefore we don't have a Marim Makom for Rab. So what was Rab's reasoning for saying that we don't need a heker and that airspace is not problematic? Elameha answers the Gemara, maybe Rab would have said it because of the following case. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rav Baravuha, Amar Rav. So this is going a multi-generation comment here. Rav Nachman says in the name of Rav Baravuha, in the name of Rav, if you have Shnei Batim, the Shalosh Churvos Beinehen, you have 2 houses at the end and 3 houses in between the 3 houses that are churvos, 3 destroyed houses in between the 2. Let's say you and I live on each end, right? I have 1 house here, you have 1 house there, and there's 3 destroyed houses between us. That's the case with the Gemara, says in the name of Rav. So if you have Shnei Batim v'shalosh churvos beinehen, how does Rav hold? Zemishtamish b'samuch shalo adei zrika. I can use the churva right next to me because I can easily throw. So the avir is going to be easily accessible to me. And you can also throw into the churva that's next to you b'samuch shalo adei zrika. And turning to the top of a Hamid Beis, the ha'imtzai aser. So this is actually very similar to our case because what is not allowed? The common space in the middle is not allowed because you could both technically throw there. But I can use my space and you can use your space. Seemingly, airspace doesn't bother one another. Perfectly fine. So then says the Gemara, wait a minute, hold on one second. This sheet of Rav needs analysis. Yosiv Rab Barona, v'ka'amar lahashmaisa. Rab Barona was teaching over this piece of Torah. The Gemara says, Amar le Rabbi Eliezer, that's not possible. It can't be Rabbi Eliezer. That's a Tana's name, and he did not overlap with Rav. So, or with Rab Barona for that matter. Rab Barona was a 2nd generation Amora. Rabbi Eliezer was a Tana, and Rav was a 1st generation Amora. So the before Shem on the side changed it to Rav Elazar, the Amora. Amar le Rav Elazar, Bar Be Rav, Amar Rav Hachi. He said, did Rav really say this case that you have the case where it's house? Churva, house, and it's mutter to use the immediate churva next to your house. Did he really say that? Amar le in. Yes, it's what he said. Achvi le ushpezei. Tell me where he's sleeping. I gotta go hear this directly from him. I have to go hear this from him. So Achvi le, he said he's staying at the neighbor's house. He went there. Asa lakame de Rav. And Rav Elazar went to Rav. Amar le, Amar mar hachi. Did you really say that? I don't understand. Rav says, Amar le in. Yes, in fact, I did. I said that case. Amar le, I'm confused. The Hamarhu de Amar, you yourself said that lazeb shilshol v'lazeb zrika shnei asurin. So what is he talking about here with this argument? What he's saying is like this: if I can throw, if I could use the churva immediately next to me with a light throw, no problem. Can I throw to your property through 3 churvas? Potentially. It's a harder throw. So then that's what the argument is that he's saying to Rav, you yourself hold that when it comes to shilshal, which is one level of difficulty, ulazeb is rika, and this is another level of difficulty, shnei asurin. How can you say that the case of the churvas is mutter? You yourself said in a very similar case that it should be asur. So Amar Le, Rav had made a very big insight. Rav said, you misunderstood that case. Mi savers de kaime kishura. Did you think that the case of the 3 houses that were churva was linear, kishura, like a line? My house, churva, churva, churva. Your house? That's absolutely not how it's built. And that's what the Gemara has a drawing here. I have it in the middle of my Gemara here. Amar Le, mi savers de kaime kishura. You thought it was a straight line? No, absolutely not. De kaime kichatsuva. It's made like a tripod. It's made like some type of shape where there's 3 different churvas. So the picture I have here is bayis, a churva that goes on the left side from one house to the next, and on the other side are 2 churvas between the 2 batim. So the 2 that are each one that has a churva immediately next to its property mutter. The one that's connected to both is asur. Now, if you look at the case where it's bayis, churva, churva, bayis, that's very similar to our case, and therefore Rav has supported himself. What do we see here yet again? We see that Rav can hold of his opinion that I don't ruin you because of avir. I don't ruin you because of airspace. Again, just going back to our picture, this is exactly what Rav and Shmuel are arguing about. Do we say that we need a heker? How do we understand each of the shitas? Rav will support himself with this particular case of the churva to show that no, we don't even need a heker, and airspace will not ruin my affiliation to you. Shmuel says we absolutely do need a heker. Amar le Rav Papa le Rava, lema Shmuel. Maybe Shmuel, who says in fact you do need a heker. Again, the windowsill, the little ledge that we see on the left window. Well, maybe we should say lema Shmuel lesle de Rav Dimi. Maybe we should say that Shmuel doesn't hold of the opinion of Rav Dimi. How so? Because Tichiyasa Rav Dimi, Amar of Yochanan, we've learned this before. Makom she'ein bo dalid al dalid, mutter lebnei rishus harabim u lebnei rishus hayachid lekatef alav. I think I gave this example when this last came up. If this gender was less than 4x4 and let's say tall enough, and I'm in an Eruvin, I'm allowed to adjust the package in Rishus HaYachid, and a person is able to do similar things on both sides. I just can't use this as a ha'arama to put something on the other side of the next Rishus. That's not allowed. So if I'm in Rishus HaYachid and you're in another Rishus HaYachid, I can't use this space to cheat. Not allowed to do that. So the Gemara's implied question is, why is that mutter? Where's the heker? It's airspace. How can Shmuel say you need a heker? After all, we see here that you don't. Answers the Gemara. This is the second time, either in Shas or in this Masechta, I can't remember which one, maybe the third time, that we've seen this principle. Says the Gemara, a very important idea. Hasam Rishuyos Deoraisa. In the case that you were talking about, of the Bnei Rishus HaRabim and the Bnei Rishus HaYachid, that was talking on a level of Rishuyos Deoraisa. There we don't need to add the chumrah of a heker. However, hacha, in our case, what are we dealing with? We're dealing with Eruvin Chatzeros, Eruvin Tchumen, we're dealing with lower level Dinei Derabanan. So here, hacha, Rishuyos Derabanan. Sometimes we have to be more careful about the smaller mitzvos, like as it's famously referred to in the Ramah, mitzvos shehanashim dash ba'akevav. Where do we need chizuk on the small things? It's not on the big things usually. We usually need chizuk on the small things. And that's what the Gemara is highlighting here. By Dinei D'Oraisa, I don't need to warn you about that. That's it. You're violating major isurim if you're not careful. But by Dinei D'Rabbanan, says Shmuel, we need to have a heker. So you can't bring a proof from here that Shmuel is wrong. Amar le Ravina le Rava, mi Amar Rav Hachi, again asking against Rav, because let's see how this goes against Rav. The Itmar, we have a statement in the Amoraim. Itmar is always Amoraim. Shnei batim mishnei tzidei rishus harabim. If you have 2 houses on the opposite sides of a rishus harabim, and what is left out here is that there are windows. So like, let's say from my 2nd floor window to your 2nd floor window, right? But there's a rishus harabim in the middle, but we're throwing above 10 tvachim, right? So it's makom p'tur. So am I allowed to do that? So Rava bar Rav Huna Amar Rav, remember this is Rav who we're talking about. Asr lizrok mizelazeh, you're not allowed to do it. Why not? It's avir. Why not? If Rav is saying that you can't asr from one friend to another through avir, then I don't understand what the problem is. Throw it. Why does Rav say it's asr? Let's finish out the machlokas. Shmuel Amar mutar lizrok mizelazeh. So says the Gemara, we have a contradiction in Rav. Rav wanted to say that there's nothing that you could aser because of avir. However, we see over here that he does forbid avir because he doesn't let me throw from my back window to your back window. Why can't we play catch on Shabbos afternoon in a makom p'tur? It's above 10 tfachim. So says the Gemara, Amar le, lav mi ukimna, don't you realize what could happen? Dimidli chad umitzi chad. Maybe our windows are not aligned so well. I don't know why that was the argument. Maybe we should have said you have bad aim. Why do the windows have to be misaligned? It's very easy to not make it into another window when you're throwing from porch to porch. It's not simple. Either way, the Gemara says the windows are not aligned. Zimnin demin gedar v'nafil. Maybe you will throw it and it will fall. Ve'asi le'asuye. Then you'll end up going down below the makom p'tur into the rishus harabim and violate real halacha. So therefore, says Rav, that case is not an argument against me. The reason I'm makbid over there is because I'm concerned about a real isser. But that's not our world. Our world was talking about low-level dinei derabanan of eruv chatzeros, and that brings us to the conclusion of our Mishnah. Sikum advarim machlokes Rav and Shmuel, and that's why you will see in Chatzer number 1 in the picture that Rav has no ledge. He holds, and I put this in the box on the outer wall of his Chatzer. Ein adam oser al chavero derech havir. There's no need to be worried about that. It is a rule across the boards. And on the left side in Shmuel's Chatzer, he does have a ledge, a ziz. Rav Yehuda extends it to a kanya, even to a reed, and Shmuel is of the opinion, tzrich and heker, we paskin like Rav. Halacha kirav b'dina. Okay, let's get to the next Mishnah. This Mishnah will take us just to the bottom of the page, a couple of lines before the bottom of the page. Halfway down, Pei Hey Amud Beis. Says the Mishnah, Hanosen es eruva b'bayis, but b'veis shar, b'veis shar achsadra umir peses eino eruv. These places are not mekomos dira, and therefore you cannot put your eruv there. And not only that, the hadarsham, even if someone does live there, your living there doesn't make it a makom dira. You can't make it a makom dira. A mere peses is not a makom dira. And therefore, eno oser alav, a person who lives there, we don't even have to worry about them as it relates to eruv. They're cut off. We don't care about them. They are not living in a makom dira. Beis hateven ubeis habakar ubeis ha'etzim ubeis ha'otzaros. These places are more storage oriented. Afal pi that it's not really a house. It's a kind of in the middle category. So here we say hareza eruv v'hadar sham oser. Yes, if you put your eruv there, then it will be considered an eruv, and someone who lives there would aser on other people in the living quarters. This last line of the Mishnah is, as we will see in the Gemara tomorrow night, Emir Tzashem is not clear from the Mishnah as to what it's talking about, but let's read it anyways. Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Rabbi Yehuda says, Im yesh sham tfisas yad shel bal habayis, if there is some degree of ownership of the actual owner of the house, then eino oser. Is this talking about the second case of the Beis HaTeven? Possibly. We'll see later in the Gemara that that's not really what's going on. But that's our Mishnah, is if an Eruv is put in a place which is not a Makom Dira, you can't make it a Makom Dira, and the Eruv is a 0, and even if somebody lives there, it's a 0. And if you put the Eruv in a place that is a Makom Dira, then that is considered a kosher Eruv. And if somebody's sleeping there and they don't make an Eruv there, then that's going to be a problem. They could aser for everybody else. Let's start with the Gemara here. 2/3 of the way down, Pehem and Beis Amar Rav Yehuda, Berei de Rav Shmuel bar Shilas. He says 2 klalim. Again, this is Rav Yehuda and Berei de Rav Shmuel. It's not Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Rav Yehuda, the son of Rav Shmuel bar Shilas. Discussion in the Meforshim who this is. It sounds like Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. It's not. It can't be, because Shmuel is not referred to as bar Shilas. And some actually change this with the addition bar Shilas mishmei de Rav. So what that would show you is that it can't be the regular Shmuel, because Shmuel didn't learn under Rav. Shmuel was a competitor of Rav. So whatever the history is, it's a drop later in time than the regular Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Either way, here are the klalim that are stipulated. Kol makum she'amru hadar sham eino oser. Anywhere where the rule is stipulated that hadar sham eino oser, that a person who's living there does not forbid, namely, where a person is sleeping or living in quarters that are not meant to be lived in, that's where we would say that hadar sham eino oser. In such a case, hanosen es eruvo eino eruv. As a rule, as our Mishnah states, anyone who puts an eruv there, it is not an eruv, chutz, with one exception. Mibeis shar de yachid, a gateway, a gatehouse of some kind that applies even only to one person. There, nobody really lives there. It's kind of like your front yard a little bit. We have to figure out in the Rishonim what this is. But in a beis shar de yachid, that would still be considered an eruv. That was klal number 1. Klal number 2, v'chol makom she'amru chachamim ein manichin bo eruv. Any place where it says that you're not allowed to place an eruv, but that place where you're not allowed to put an eruv, manichin bo shituf, there you're allowed to do shituf muvos. You can put your shituf muvos in that place, chutz me avir mavui, except for the airspace of a mavui, where you cannot put the shituf mavui there, because as we'll see in the Gemara soon, that area is not considered protected. My Kamashmalan, says the Gemara. Tanina, we already learned this. Look at the Mishnah on Pehei Amud Beis in the middle of the page. Rav Yehuda Breda Rav Shmuel in the name of Rav potentially is saying all these things. This is mamish a Mishnah. Tanina, Hanosin es Eruv bevei Sharach Sadr Mepesas Eino Eruv. Eruv hu delo have, Hashitu have. We know all this already. Beis Shar de Yachid, answers the Gemara. Beis Shar de Yachid ba'aver de Mavui Itzricha le delo Tanan. We needed to have this extra din of Rav Yehuda Breda Rav Shmuel because in each of his cases he had the words chutz, except for this and except for that. In the first case he excluded chutz mi Beis Shar de Yachid. In the second case it was chutz mi aver Mavui, and that was not clearly mentioned in our Mishnah and unclear. And therefore, he had his Memra, he had his opening statement on the Gemara to add to our Mishnah to make sure that things were clear. Tanya Nami Hachi, this was also listed in a Brisa. We are 2 lines before the widest lines on Pehei Amud Beis. Tanya Nami Hachi, the Brisa writes in support of this understanding of our Mishnah and the statement of Rav Yehuda Bereda Rav Shmuel. What do we say here? Hanosen es eruvo, someone who puts her eruv beveis shar, achsadra umir peses, Ubechatzer uvemavui, extra wording that's not found in our Mishnah. Hareze eruv. I v'hatnan ein ze eruv. We just said you can't put it in a mavui. Ema hareze shituf. You're right. I meant a shituf. Says Gemara. That's the problem. Shituf b'mavui lo mintar. We're not allowed to put it in a mavui. You're not allowed to put a shituf mavui outside in that space. Ema bechatzer shebemavui. That's not what I meant. I meant a chatzer that's near the mavui. A little bit unclear language, but still the Gemara seems to embrace this understanding. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. This is of course the Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel that we were talking about. Though the Meforshim here do say that this may not say Shmuel, it may say Rav, but at least it's the right Rabbi Yehuda. So still the Girsos here are very challenging. Obviously in one page, we've seen Rav's name and Shmuel's name 15 times. So before we had the printing press, it's easy to make these errors, and it's sometimes hard to know exactly what's what historically. But here, the question wasn't who was the one who was talking. It was Rabbi Yehuda. We just don't know if it was a statement that he had learned from Rav or a statement that he learned from Shmuel. Either way, we're going to continue. Second of the widest lines, Bnei Chabura Shayim Mesubin. Let's say that we were all sitting and having a masiba. We were all having a party. The Kidei Shalem Hayom. And the day was waning. It was becoming Shabbos. So, Stam, that's a good shot. You're allowed to eat on Erev Shabbos, or you're allowed to have a Suda after Chatzos. That's not so, whatever. You have to go into Shabbos with some sense of Taiva, some sense of Taiva Sachilas. It says the Gemara, anyways, either way, maybe they weren't eating at this point, maybe they were singing. Pasha ala shulchan, the bread that's on the table, somchen alem shum eruv. You don't have to do anything mechudash. The bread that's on the table, you can use as an eruv, no problem. The Amrei Law, and some say that it was Mishum Shituf, that you can use it not only for Eruv Chatzeros, but you could even use it for Shituf Mavuos. Amar Rabba v'lo pligi. These two versions of whether or not the bread on the table could be used either for an Eruv or for a Shituf, they do not conflict with one another. Kan b'mesubin b'bayis, kan b'mesubin b'chatzer. It just depends where the party was. Was the party in the house, pre-corona? Or a kan b'mesubin b'chatzer. This one's outside. So Amar le'abai le'Rabbi, I have a raya for you. Tanya de Messiah lach. I have a brisa that supports you. What is the brisa that supports you? This brisa is found in Maseches Sukkah. Eruve chatzeros b'chatzer v'shitufe mavuos b'mavui. An eruv chatzer can be in a chatzer. We don't know really so much of the context here. And the shituf mavuos could be in a mavui v'havinan ba. And if we were to look into this more, eruv chatzeros b'chatzer, how can you put eruv chatzeros b'chatzer? But not. Hanos and es eruvo beveis shar achsadra umer peses eno eruv. How can that be? So it says the Gemara, Ema eruv chatzeros beveis babayis shebechatzer. The eruv chatzeros is, you're right, it's not in the chatzer mamish. It's in a house that leads into a chatzer, so that's considered fine. And shitufe mavuos, there too is bechatzer shebemavui. So we touch up the Gemara so that it makes perfect sense. And what we do is in fact blend this Gemara and this Mishnah together. So we basically have put together 3 statements, and this is really an important methodology of how Rishonim in theory could look at a Gemara. You have a Mishnah, you have a statement of the Amoraim that doesn't seem to match. We explained it and found a brisa to support, and we found a corollary statement of Rav Shmuel, and it all blends together relatively nicely. Again, the names are difficult, but the material does work out very well. And really the way to best understand this whole sugya is by looking at the brisa in the middle with some of the caveats and changes that were made. I know it meant the house, and it meant the chatzer shebemavui, and then everything would work out, and one could then make an eruv with the food on the table. We'll stop here, and we'll pick up the 2 dots from the bottom for daf Pevav tomorrow night. Absolutely.